Hello, and welcome to all who are now joining our international online conference, the material body of the book Between Tradition and Innovation. My name is Karolina Jakaite, and I am a researcher of Arts Research Institute of Vilnius Academy of Arts, and I will be moderating this, the fourth and the last session, which is dedicated to contemporary practices of book design. The session will be in English. We will have 4 speakers, and as you can see the titles and the short descriptions in the program below, I would like to ask to be active and please send the questions, which will be answered during the discussion time after all papers. And now I am glad to introduce our first speaker from Poland, habilitated Dr. Katarzyna Bazarnik from Jagiellonian University in Krakow. And she teaches English literature and literary theory at the Institute of English Studies. She has published works on James Joyce and Brian Stanley Johnson and Liberature, as well as literary translation. She collaborated with Zenon Pfeiffer on 2 liberatic books, Okalecene and Opacene. Together they co-edited Liberature series at Ha Alt Publishing House and curate Liberature reading room in the main public library in Krakow. So, dear Katarzyna, the screen is yours.
Good afternoon. In my talk, I'm going to explain how the material book, its physical structure and typography, can function as aspects of literary style in a specific type of multimodal literature called liberature. Liberature is a neologism that hybridizes literature with the Latin liber, that is, the book, but also free. The term, and the very idea of this genre, was proposed in 1999 by Polish poet Zenon Pfeiffer in an article manifesto published under the title Liberature, an appendix to a dictionary of literary terms. Pfeiffer's reflections were based on his own writing practice, as well as an observation that some writers have explored and used the book not as a transparent container for a text, or its transparent material foundation, but as a meaningful space deliberately designed by the author and participating in the production of meaning. Instances of liberatic works can be found in the past. For example, Laurence Sterne's Tristram, Shandy would be a model example of this kind of writing. William Blake's illuminated book are another example. And in the 20th century, Raymond Federman's postmodernist novels such as Double or Nothing, in which, as he warned us, it is the author, not the editor, the printer, the designer, or the publisher, who is the sole agent in the design and production of the book, of the literary work. Or, for that matter, B.S. Johnson, a British novelist, demonstrating a similar approach to the materiality of the literary medium. These are only a few examples of Anglophone literature, but in other languages and literatures, many other can be found. However, it was only at the turn of the millennium that the idea of liberature could be developed, not least because increasingly more authors all over the world have been exploiting material poetics characterized for such works. The phenomenon has been conceptualized as a hybrid multimodal genre, polysemiotic and hybridizing different arts by myself and the above-mentioned Zenon Pfeiffer. Also as a poetics or aesthetics rather than a genre, as Agnieszka Przybyszewska claims, or even as a contemporary literary avant-garde movement in Polish literature, which is the view represented by Emiliano Ranocchi and myself as well. It is also an imprint, the name of an imprint, which Pfeiffer and I have been running in Hart Publishing House since 2003. In fact, similar trends have been evident in literatures of other languages, and that's why analogous parallel terms have been proposed to describe this kind of material writing. Hence, Catherine Hiles speaks of technotexts, texts that are meta-reflexive and reflect self-consciously on the technologies of their production. In 2009, Jessica Pressman proposed a term, aesthetics of bookishness, to describe this kind of approach in contemporary fiction. Finally, Alison Gibbons proposes the term multimodal literature to refer to the different semiotic modes exploited by such works. And Laurie Emerson speaks about reading writing in the context of electronic multimodal literature. Conceptualized as a literary genre, literature can be described as a type of literary discourse in which texts, that is linguistic verbal text, and the material body of the book are so inextricably linked that they form a meaningful organic unity. Thus, literature embraces this kind of creative writing in which the book is an essential semantically loaded component of the literary work. Its form is meaningful, often iconically related to its verbal content, whereas typography and layout contribute to the meaning production as much as lexical and stylistic choices. I would like to stress that the form of the book is the author's decision, so it is the writer who envisages it as such an organic whole. This medium specificity distinguishes literature from traditional literary genres whose stylistic concerns are limited to linguistic and stylistic choices. Creating such a work, the author also designs the look of his or her work. So literature must indeed be viewed as a type of multimodal literature, insofar as the liberatic work is a complex artistic work which combines several semiotic modes: the linguistic one, the visual one, the spatial or architectural or structural mode. It has been already acknowledged that in studying multimodal literature, traditional tools of poetic or narratological analysis are limited to the investigation of stylistic choices, to the study of metaphors, figures of speech and thought, points of view, characterization, need to be complemented by tools able to tackle the multimodal dimensions, such as, for example, dynamic typography, page layouts, arrangement of texts across the whole space of the book, or the space of inscription, because it doesn't have to be a traditional codex. Hence, these tools need to be complemented by the study of visual styles, visual grammar, material rhetoric, compositional spaces, which can be subsumed under the labels of cognitive poetics or cognitive stylistics and multimodal analysis. At the end of my presentation, I provide you with a list of scholars developing and using such tools in literary analysis. Now, I would like to move on to discuss briefly 4 works which exemplify how typography and compositional space of the book can be used to enhance the poetic and narratological means of expression. The first examples include collage-based works. Herta Müller's Der Wachter nimmt seinen Kamm, or the English title is The Guard Takes His Comb. In the slide you can see its Polish bilingual translation edition, and Graham Roll's The Woman's World, a novel published in 2005. Both are, as I said, collage-based works. That is, they are composed from cut-out texts from magazines and newspapers. So words, phrases, and even whole sentences or paragraphs are pasted either on the spaces of the page or individual cards, as you can see in the case of Müller's collection of collage poems. Published in 1993 by German publisher Rowohlt, it was translated into Polish by Artur Kożuch and published in Liberature series in 2010. The collage techniques evokes associations with anonymous blackmail correspondence. These anonymous trite, transparent language of the media, of the magazines and newspapers, is here deconstructed, shattered, broken, fragmented, decomposed, and recomposed. However, the emerging composition is gapped, is clearly fragmented, is incongruous and incoherent. Hence, the elemental, so to speak, nature of language is foregrounded. According to formalist scholars of poetry, the essence of poetry consists in defamiliarization, in astranienie, in making things strange. Here we are faced with a language that is made extremely strange by being torn out from the original source and put in different, strange, surrealistic contexts. But paradoxically, this is a way to achieve originality through mashup and recycling of ready-made phrases. The disturbing visual aspect of Müller's poetry goes hand in hand with surrealistic landscapes, strange, disturbing characters encountered by the lyrical eye, who pester and follow her on trains, in streets of the city, in various spaces. So the visual and verbal messages go hand in hand. The texts and the visual layout are equally disturbing. A similar visual incongruity, yet in line with the plot of the story, can be seen in Rawle's novel. It tells the story of Norma Fontaine and her brother, Roy Little, who live together with their mother in a small suburban house. In the novel, Roy just begins his new job as a delivery man, while his sister stays at home, living in isolation and never leaving the house. But it gradually dawns on the reader that Roy and Norma are in fact one and the same person, and that it is the brother who suffers from split personality disorder, and he impersonates his long-dead sister, who tragically lost her life in a car accident, which Roy witnessed as a small boy, and now he feels guilty. So this story, which begins with an idyllic vision, with a serene vision of a suburban idyllic house, which you can see in the slide, is in fact a psychological thriller. And the sense of anxiety, the sense of suspense and apprehension is perceptible also from the visual layout of the story, composed out of ready-made chunks of texts, cut out from women's magazines of the 60s, British women's magazines. The typographic layer, composed of excerpts in different typefaces of varied sizes and colors, produces an impression of both linguistic and visual incoherence. However, as we read on, we perceive the story as fairly coherent on the narrative level. Another tension entailed in the use of ready-made, banal, trite pieces of language, and the originality of thus produced work is also visible in this work. Again, judged from the formalist stylistic perspective, the all too familiar language of women's magazines is radically defamiliarized here due to the mashup technique, or thanks to the mashup technique. It foregrounds the visual dimension of language, but visual appearances, the looks are very important for Roy impersonating a perfect woman. The text looks literally like a patchwork stitched together from scraps of leftover material. And this is reflected on the thematic level as well, since Norma, whom Roy impersonates, is in fact an artificial simulated personality that Roy stitches together from bits and pieces that he learns about real womanhood from the magazines. As I said, on the plot level, we could imagine that the story could be told in an ordinary, traditional way. But Roll's decision, the author's decision to use the collage technique, enriches the story, intensifies the effect of surprise, playfulness, and incongruity. A variety of fonts is also used in Zenon Pfeiffer's and Katarzyna Bazarnik's Okaleczenie. The book contains two stories inscribed in the two outer codices. They refer to two events taking place in hospital wards. In one part, a man is dying, surrounded by his numerous family, who have come to say goodbye to the dying father, uncle, and son-in-law. In the other part, a young couple are waiting for the baby to be born. They are also in hospital, and the woman is in labor. Now, all these characters in the story are characterized entirely by the appearance of the typeface. Hence, an elderly fat uncle who features in the death part, so to speak, speaks in bold, thick typeface, while an elderly thin aunt has a correspondingly thin, slanted font. In the middle section, in the middle codex, two kinds of handwriting are intertwined, suggesting intimacy and a loving encounter. This section comes in between the two stories set in hospital, as if suggestive of a time and place outside these spheres, beyond the ordinary realistic world. This impression is emphasized by the reverse placement of the codex. The three codices are connected by the covers, and the parallelism of the hospital settings is emphasized by placing them on the outside ends of the book, while the middle codex is set opposite to them. So this physical structure of the book hints at the subtle narrative link connecting both stories, because the textual hints suggest that the dying man can in fact be reborn as the expected baby. Finally, I would like to comment on Adam Thirlwell's Capot, a novel from 2012 dealing with the aftermath, or actually dealing with the events of the Arab Spring. The narrator, who watches the events via the mass media, via the internet and the TV, attempts to make sense of what he sees in those partly exotic, partly incomprehensible settings. And he tries to invent a story that would help him understand what's going on. But his story is composed of bits and pieces of discourse that he encounters in the media, and this is typographically reflected in separate blocks of text variously oriented on the pages of the book. Parts of the story literally even unfold in front of the reader's eyes like a magic carpet of the Arabian tales that he alludes to. So in this typographic arrangement and in this material structure of the unfolding leporello passages in the book, Thirlwell alludes to the origins of the word textere, text, that is the Greek textere, to weave, and to the metaphorical description of telling a story as weaving. Consequently, I hope these 4 examples prove that in literature, the book, in all its material entirety, can be perceived as a complex multimodal sign that needs to be taken into account in an analysis, in a literary stylistic analysis. As semiotician Wojciech Kalaga put it, the essence of literature is in the totality of the work, which integrates the semantic aspects of the text with its fabric into a semiotic unity. As Pfeiffer ingeniously observes, in a work of literature, thanks to the unity of text and the writing space, the representing world, a book, or in the case of shorter works, the surface of the page, ought to be considered as part of the world that is represented. And it is indeed shaped by the author, writer, as much as he or she shapes its linguistic texture. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot to Katarzyna. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker, who will continue to the same theme, Dr. Emiliano Ranocchi from Udine University, whose title is 20 Years of Liberature, a book-bound genre. Emiliano Ranocchi studied Russian and German philology at Udine University and received a PhD in Polish literature at Sapienza University of Rome. He currently works as a fellow researcher at Udine University, where he teaches Polish language and literature. As a 18th and a specialist for Central Europe literature, he focuses mainly on this period and area. For several years, he has been researching the Polish francophone writer Jan Potocki, and he has also re-established the meeting between Jan Potocki, Goethe, and Herder in Karlsbad in the summer of 1785. For quite a long time, he has likewise been involved with modernism, particularly with the literary output of forgotten interwar Polish writer Jerzy Sosnkowski. He has also written about Liberature, a Polish literary movement dealing with the physical shape of the book. He is the deputy editor-in-chief of the quarterly review Auto Portraits. So, dear Emiliano, the screen is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Emiliano Ranocchi. I'm fellow researcher at Udine University in Italy. And in the short time I dispose of, I will try to present you an important phenomenon in contemporary Polish literature, which is called liberature. I go to my presentation. We have to do with something quite difficult to define, at least at the beginning, because we have to do both with something which we could call a new literary movement, but at the same time it's also a new definition of something which existed already at the moment when the word was invented. This phenomenon does not necessarily coincide with the invention of the term, but which is the relationship then between this phenomenon, between what has begun to exist in 1999 and what already existed before. But let's start from the beginning. As I said, 1999 is the year when officially the term of liberature was invented, and it was on the occasion of an exhibition at the Jagiellonian Library in Krakow. It was the exhibition of the unconventional book, organized in collaboration with the Wexford Art Centre of Ayr. On the 16th of June, it was Bloomsday. This is not an insignificant information. Was published an issue on a literary review called Dekada Literacka. The author was a young writer, Zenon Pfeiffer, and this short issue, we could call it a manifesto, was entitled Liberature Appendix to a Dictionary of Literary Terms. The Dictionary of Literary Terms was a real dictionary, an existing dictionary, and it was quite sort of a discussion, of polemic discussion with this dictionary, where Zenon Pfeiffer could not find such an entry as a space of the literary work. Of course, there was something like the space in a literary work, but it was not the same thing. I want to quote some fragments from this first seminal manifesto, as I said. The shape of the book should not be determined by generally accepted conventions, but result from the author's autonomous decision, just as actions of his characters and the choice of words originate from them. The physical and spiritual aspects of the literary work, that is, the book and the text printed in it, should complement each other to create a harmonious effect. It does not have to be an all-embracing book, but it should at least be a book embracing the whole of the book, in which all the elements, not only the text, are meaningful. Be it called literature or rather liberature, the matter of terminology is of secondary importance. This is a concern for theoreticians, not writers. But whatever the case, I believe that this fourth, still officially unacknowledged, mode will infuse new life into literature. This genre may be the future of literature. We read already here, we have already here the proposal to treat this concept of literature as a new literary genre. I will come back to this idea in a while. So we have a contraposition between the representation of the space in a literary work and the speciality of the literary work. And the space of the literary work is nothing else but the book itself. For what is the space of the literary work? According to the above-mentioned dictionary, nothing. There is no such entry at all. There is only space in a literary work, which, in other words, and slightly simplifying the question, means the setting or the plot. But the first elementary space one deals with, even before one starts reading a work, is an actual book, a material object. The outward appearance of the book, the number and arrangement of its pages, if there need to be pages, the kind of the cover, if there need to be a cover, this is the space of the literary work. That includes all its other spaces. And like those other spaces, this space is very real. So there is no text outside space because the book is a special object. This idea was thought against the dominant tradition, beginning with Plato's logocentrism, through the invention of press, which allowed for the multiplication of physical objects from on one side, one on the other side. In a way, the press distinguished between made an abstraction. From one side, we have the text, which was thought as something immaterial, and on the other side, the book as an object which could be multiplied. So we have something like a divorce between the immaterial text and the physical object of the book. And at the end, we come to the primacy of the signified or the signifier to the detriment of the latter. The signified is only a supporter, a carrier, something which can be easily changed without any influence on the content. And already this division between content and container is the object of Pfeiffer's critic. Of course, this was not the only possible tradition in Europe. We have another alternative tradition, which is so old as this one. And you have also a group of godparents of literature, or authors who, according to Pfeiffer, practiced literature still before the word was invented. Before literature, the advent of literature was prepared by quite important moment in the development of critical thought in the Western countries, the 60s, where we have quite different authors, not necessarily related to each other, who began to think about literature in a different way, and we can say prepared the way to the idea of literature, not only in Western Europe, but also in Poland, like, for example, Czyż or Nowakowski. Nowakowski, for example, is a writer who began to make his own books by himself at home, and he started to practice literature still before the word was invented. We have also a visual artist, a painter like Andrzej Bednarczyk, who works at the Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow, who at least in the past operated a lot with the shape of the book, and some of these works are not real books, but other works are real books. For example, this is the Sanctuary of the Stone. This is a real book, and this one is an installation in the open air, and this is also sort of a text we can read in different directions. You have also an artist like Stanisław Druszcz, who was so at the border between visual arts and concrete poetry. in Pfeiffer's vision, we must distinguish, however, between literature and artist's book. Even if sometimes the border between them can be not so necessarily sharp, but in general, literature is an extension, is intended as an extension of literature, whereas artists' books belong to fine arts. As I said, the border must not necessarily be very sharp, as in the case of Bednarczyk, who created both artists' books as literature books. Fundamental is the iconicity of the medium. It means the medium is significant as the literary content. And it is not only the visual space of the page, but also the aspect of the book, the material aspect of the book. Another important element is the interactivity. Interactivity, it means that very often the reader must to enter a sort of interaction with these books. It is not so that we receive a ready-made object, but we have very often to go our own path within the book. Of course, not every element must be mandatory. Not all these features must be present in each work of literature. For example, the last feature I have here, the non-linearity of perception, is not a constitutive feature, but sometimes we have such works, and then literature come quite close to hypertext. It works very good when we have to do with the digital medium, for example. I already mentioned the problem of whether we have the right to consider literature a literary genre. At the beginning, Pfeiffer was very sure, quite confident about that. But aside from his convictions, I think the most definitive explication of this idea has come recently. A few years ago, in 2015, Agnieszka Przybyszewska published an essay in which she expressed her doubts about whether we ought to consider literature as a literary genre. She proposed in this book to speak rather about the liberatic character of literary works, but this pushed Katarzyna Bazarnik to answer to these objections, and the answer is contained in a book which inspired the title of my presentation, Liberature, a book-bound genre, where the discussion between Bazarnik and Przybyszewska takes place around the conception of what we mean when we are speaking about genre. In this book, Bazarnik poses a pragmatic idea of literary genre, so not a normative one. It is not something which has to show a mandatory way, but a label which signals that the author resorts to material rhetoric and prompts the reader to pay attention to non-linguistic codes. This was a quote from the book. The book is a special means of organizing literary discourse, a semantically charged, non-transparent interface. I must switch all these slides and go to the end. We have, of course, different possibilities how we can practice literature, and this is again a problem with this term, because from one side it is the fruit of the mind of one single author, Xenon 5, but on the other side, as a term, a description of a genre, it describes very different things which do not necessarily fit into what Xenon 5 does. Actually, the only common feature for all these authors who practice literature today as in the past is a certain approach to the physical, to the materiality of the book as an object. So I go to the conclusions. The book as a medium must be redefined in the context of new media, because this new situation is responsible for the loss of self-evidence of the codex form. The book has ceased to be a cheap and effective data storage medium, because this function is today taken by the new media. And paradoxically, this new situation releases the hidden potential of the book. I would like to end my presentation by taking up McLuhan's dichotomy, hot media versus cold media. Perhaps you remember it. The book is intended as a medium. Is getting cooler because the web is hot. The web is hot. It means that it does not require the collaboration of the user, not at the same degree as a book. So the book is getting cooler and cooler by the influence of the hot web. The book implies a bigger participation than once, and this implies also a rediscovery of its visual and haptic values. So I must end. I'm at your disposal for your questions if you have any, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot to Emiliano. And we will come back to literature topics and questions and answers in the discussion time. And now I would like to introduce our third speaker for our third presentation. And the author would be Gytis Kudžinskas from Vilnius, book artist and designer. So his topic would be the book as a pocket-sized gallery and continuation of a work of art. Gytis is a famous book artist. He works in the sphere of visual and sound art too, and designs art albums. He lives and works in Vilnius, and during his studies, he studied at Vilnius Academy of Arts, different faculties in Klaipėda, and also he is a member and now actually the head of Union of Lithuanian Art Photographers. And he here is presenting actually his artistic practice and work related with such a special no routine books phenomenon, which he will present together with his partner Vilma Samulionytė. So, dear Gytis, you are welcome and the screen is yours.
Hello everybody. I am Gytis Kudžinskas, one of the founder of publishing platform No Routine Books. How could we describe our activity? In very simple way, we would say that is an artistic limited edition publishing practices. But if we analyze our practice in publishing context, it will be easy to describe in a way of comparing existing traditional and alternative or independent publishing strategies. In that way, I can say No Routine Books is something between traditional albums, monographs, exhibition catalogs, and artist books. Our books have different elements of all those traditional publications. On the other hand, No Routine Books publishing practice can be called method of creating new piece of art in collaboration between author, designer, publisher, and printing masters. When we choose authors for our publications, we always ask him or her about possibility to push the boundaries of existing art piece and create reinterpretation for the publication as artwork. We never seek to create a new container for presenting existing information, but try to give it to expand meaning. We try to create a specific space for artwork or artwork in book form itself. For us and for authors, often that is big challenge, but the result in this case always is surprising, and we don't have disappointed authors in our list. For printing, usually we use offset printing process, and for it we were not once called crazy, but we always try to keep quality of reproduction. After printing sheets according to the need, we can print on top of it silk screen, stencil print, or anything else required for publication. And post-press process and finishing, binding, always we do in our studio or kitchen. And always our publications run in 99 editions. After that complicated process, No Routine Books can look like artist book, but in distribution and formal details and publication have all attributes required for traditional monographs. And okay, let's jump to preview our published books. It's a little bit strange to do it online because in our books materiality, printing, binding, and of course smell playing important role. And we as publishers don't have e-shop as we understood that our customers want to touch and feel our books before paying high price. And now I would like to invite Vilma Samolinytė, second co-member of No Routine Books, to present her book Liber Homo Guten Tag.
Hi everybody. So, thank you Gytis for inviting me and for presenting No Routine Books. Since we said that we kind of present everything in a material way, so I will present the book Liber Homo Guten Tag this way. Gytis, of course, is the designer of this book, and probably first it's important to talk about this project because it was super multi-layered project of documentary film, photography exhibition, and the third part was book. The topic of the book is a German minority in Lithuania and their move after during the Second World War. So the project contains lots of archival material, old photos, letters, some objects, the new photos also, time maps. So I was super grateful that Gytis suggested me to use box as part of the stories about my grandmother who was fleeing Lithuania. So when the person flees the country or home, in old days they would take probably a box, put there what is the most important and run. So in this case we came up with the idea of the box. The project or the exhibition had these kind of three timelines, before war, during the war, and after the war, where we already, me and my sister, were present. So we decided to print three. I can hold this. We decided to print three posters, which covers those three timelines. And another thing, I don't know if it's possible to see here online, there is this pattern which repeats itself on the three posters and on the book. I was always thinking about connecting things over time or over the distance and time. So Gytis decided to create this kind of DNA-like figure, connecting certain pictures or lists or objects, and then it repeats itself on the cover of the book. So the three posters printed in offset and then silk screened on top of it. Then we have the book of new images which were created. So this one is probably the most closest thing to the book, where yeah, it's just a normal book of new pictures which were taken during the research, traveling around. Then the part of the book, as I said, was pictures and letters. That's the digital printing and black and white photos. And the last part of the book is the textbook, which is presented like this in English and Lithuanian. then everything piles up in the box. And also this is what we said, that it's not just a story of a person in the kind of global world, but also it's a story of a printing or history of a printing techniques, because it's here it's used probably everything from the
letterpress, but
from the
everything from second world, from 20th century printing, how printing changes in the 20th century. We can in that book, in that project, we can found all techniques used in 20th century.
Okay, so
we can read that book as history of printing in Europe in 20th century.
Okay, so thank you. The other book we would like to present is what is it? Reinis Lismanis.
It's Latvian author Reinis Lismanis. It's last of our publication.
Or the newest. The name of the book we're not gonna pronounce because it's the code of the paper. Epson paper?
Not paper, Epson inks.
Or Epson inks. So maybe in the beginning it's important to talk a little bit about the process of Reinis, how he's creating, or what do you think? So Reinis is the person who lives today, and in our digital imaging time, but he would like to create his work by hands or somehow manually involve manual work. So what he does, he uses everything what is needed to create a digital print. So he uses the Epson paper, Epson inks, what else? His brain. So he goes to these printing places in London and he collects empty cartridges, and as we all know, the cartridge is never empty. After that he puts this ink into some kind of container and sprays very simple patterns on Epson paper, different sizes. Like his images are quite large, but for the book we asked him to create a little bit smaller ones.
And when we make that book, how to say, when Reinis mixing digital culture and manual work, and when we starting to work with this book, we decided we can
we decided to kind of flip his concept upside down a little bit and kind of return it back to the digital process. So we decided to take a semi-transparent paper. Since he, from the very beginning, maybe it's important to mention that since he's collecting the cartridges, so his colors and for the patterns are pure, like cyan, magenta, yellow, and blue. And when we decided to take the semi-transparent paper, we kind of brought back the printing process into work in mixing colors. So when you go through the book, you see the patterns mixing and you see the colors mixing, kind of. And the book comes with the original print. We usually try in our publications put something from the author, like or some kind of additional photo or original photo to the book to make it unique. Of course, all the books are numbered and signed, so usually it's 99 copies.
Maybe we leaving.
Maybe we should leave you
with our books and without our comments.
and without our comments. Okay. So you will see 4 videos of our previously made books. Some of them are sold out and we cannot sell them anymore, but anyway, enjoy.
And thank you for watching.
Thanks a lot to Gytis and Vilma for such a live talk and videos, I guess, from your studio. And actually, we will continue with the no routine books. And I'm very glad to introduce our last speaker and my colleague, Dr. Agne Narushite, who is a famous art critic and curator specializing in photography. She's also an associate professor of Vilnius Academy of Arts. She is active as an editor of the photography section in the weekly publication Septynios Meno Dienos, 7 Days of Art, and a regular commentary writer for the Lithuanian national radio program Kultūros Savaitė or the Culture Week. She has published her scholarly studies in the following book, the one which was the first, The Aesthetics of Boredom in Lithuanian Photography, published by the publishing house of Vilnius Academy of Arts in 2008, and the later two famous publications on Lithuanian photography history, the one which is authored together with Margarita Matulytė. And one of the last books in 2017 was on post-ars partitura. In 2019, together with her colleagues Lolita Jablonskienė, Laima Kreivytė, and Jolanta Marcišauskytė Jurašienė, Agne updated the permanent exhibition of the National Gallery of Art, which tells the history of modern art in Lithuania. The presentation of today is entitled The Non-Routine Aesthetics of the Photography Book, a study of no-routine books publications. Dear Agne, the floor and the screen is yours.
Hello, I'm pleased to present some of the most interesting examples of photography book design at this conference dedicated to the art of the book. When I pronounce the words a photography book, an image pops up in everybody's mind. I bet the covers of that imaginary book and pages inside are black or white. The photographer's name is written in large bold typeface, and the word photographs is spelled in tiny letters. A shortish essay at the beginning or at the end is a must. And the book consists of pages upon pages of photographs in a certain sequence, preferably forming a kind of visual narrative from the photographer's life or about some worldly phenomenon, such a day in a city. The design is as simple as possible, so as not to disturb the process of viewing. The reader is supposed to dive into the images and forget the book. The book, in other words, normally should not attract attention to itself. It is the means of exhibiting photographs, an excellent means, because photography on its pages looks almost as good as original prints. It also acquires a new identity because of the different size and the context. Therefore, the means is also a medium that changes how the photographs are presented, viewed, read, and preserved. Because of the choices of specific photographs, the sequencing, decisions concerning the design, the quality of paper and printing, photography books form our knowledge of entire photographic archives. But they are only fragments shaped by other people, and here we have it, a photographer's oeuvre summed up in a book that pretends to be a neutral medium. But it does not have to be so. This is what the independent publisher No Routine Books, founded by Vilma Samulionytė and Gytis Kudžinskas in 2014, aimed to tackle. They would treat the photography book as a medium which has its own material qualities, its own language and meaning. The words chosen to name the publishing initiative define negatively the context into which it emerges. Whilst reading No Routine, we immediately know that other books are routine, perhaps fitting the type of the book I have just described. Routine is an overused approach to design, typefaces, color, structure, size, format. Decisions made by the makers of the first photographic books are repeated endlessly and mindlessly until their novelty and meaning wear off and become banal. In other words, routine is the very neutrality of the medium, which avoids adding anything to the message of the photographs, if to remember Marshall McLuhan's famous essay. And conversely, a no-routine book would be the opposite in all the aforementioned aspects. Its shape would not readily jump to one's mind with fixed design. It would snub repetition, even with regard of the books by the same publisher. Most importantly, the book itself would become a message enhancing the one of the photographs. While routine is predominantly safe, no-routine books would sacrifice safety for the sake of adventure every time. Every new book should be unpredictable. For example, even if all of them are smallish, one book is even smaller. Hearsay by Richard Schleicher can serve as a keyring. Thus, it can be carried around like a handy resource of bizarre wisdom, overheard by the author who likes to collect found meanings like photographs of language. Or if most books offer a predetermined sequence of images, some come as box sets, and others destabilize the photographs as decisive moments by revealing the process of arranging the set, performing, and having fun, like in Stage Pictures by Audrius Puipa and Gintautas Trimakas. In order to make it possible, the publisher would have to exist in the interstice of the publishing business. Karl Marx defined interstice as a gap where small business communities escape the logic of growth and profit seeking in capitalist economy. They defy market relations in order to achieve something else. A publisher exists in such an interstice when she does not try to make money from her products, but rather finances them from some other sources and focuses on creating something new every time in small quantities. The strictly kept print run of 99 copies not only turns the books into rare collectible items, but also functions as a statement that the books are not just products to be sold, but objects sending a message. In order to show how that additional message is created, I shall analyze 3 books designed by Gytis Kučinskas as unique objects. Since I want to define what makes each book unpredictable, I will observe the chronological sequence. The first book published by No Routine Books was Album by Gytis Kučinskas. Its cover is corrugate, grey, a bit like a roof covering an old shed where people keep stuff collected during their lives. The cover suggests immediately that this book is such a storage of forgotten mementos. Its contents remain a mystery because there is no title, no author, just a cut-out letter A, the first in the alphabet, which signifies a beginning. Through it I can see an inscription in blue ink on white paper and a strip of orange background. The spine of the book is also orange, hand-sewn with a striped thread. Those who know Kučinskas as a designer can recognize orange as his signature color. Thus, we can read the meaning which the book's cover conveys. It is the first book by this designer when he is free to create as an object also as an author, not bound by other people's and any publisher's interests. If this is a book of photographs, it conspicuously lacks them. The reproductions on white pages represent only the backs of photographs we don't see. Instead, we can read the inscriptions which they occasionally bear. We can examine their worn, spotty, crumpled surfaces and sticky tapes attaching the overturned photographs together into compositions. The traces of use imply the lives of photographs in albums of boxes, in frames or in wallets, transferred from owner to owner and then thrown out or sold, thus finding their way into this anonymous collection. The inscriptions offer mini stories, though. They tell of love, even of making love. They indicate that the photographs are for keeping memory. The repeated reference to digging trenches in collective farms suggests a strange importance of this activity, which used to be photographed, perhaps in order to remember doing something together. And there are mysteries. For example, what could be represented in a photograph declaring the following: while practicing shooting, you can rest a bit. The inscriptions offer fragments of life during different periods of the 20th century, which was full of upheavals and tragedies. 2 wars, political systems changing several times, new photographic habits and technologies replacing the obsolete ones, the arrangement of the backs on the backs of the photographs in the books, especially the fact that most of them contain nothing, seems to tell us that their contents should be too easy to guess. We know the cliché compositions of photos for memory. Rather than describe the particular ones, the artist leaves them as a mystery to which we must add our imagination. The text by the poet Richard de Šileika at the end does not help much. He does not tell anything about this project or about photography, only suggests an epitaph for it. Hence, the book is a memory for the ways of fixing memories that vanish anyway. The emptiness that remains seems to be conveyed by the way the pages are double, as if the reader should separate them with a knife, only to discover nothing inside. However, there is one real photograph in each copy of the book, an original, the inscription of which I saw through the aperture of the letter A on the cover. The one in my copy says, "Virga, let this dead shadow remind you of a live heart. Pronounced R." It is both about love and about photography, which must represent the man who signed. Without a date, it seems that the users of the photograph were well aware of its relationship to death, discussed in depth by André Bazin, Roland Barthes, Susan Sontag, and others. Yet precisely the memory of Barthes prevents me from taking the photograph out and looking at what it represents. As long as I have not seen it, like I have not seen his mother's photograph in Camera Lucida, I can enhance its meaning and feel a presence of something dear to me in the moment that has been there in front of a camera. The moment I see the particular photograph of that particular man, or a couple, or something else, I don't know, the picture would lose its mystery and universal meaning. Thus, by reading only the words written in blue ink, I relate the images in this book to my old albums, and those anonymous memories become my own. The book turns me into its special reader and makes me exercise my will to postpone the gratification of curiosity. Another book that presents the material embodiment of photographs for special appreciation is Burning Slides by Aurelia Maknytė. Its cover is plain cardboard, and the title seems to have been burnt into it. This modest appearance and 3 rubber bands binding the pages make it resemble an artist's scrapbook, where all kinds of found materials are kept for a future use, and experiments are included whenever they happen without thinking much about their meaning. This particular scrapbook contains slides, positive photographs on film that come to their full effect only when they are projected on a wall. The slides represented on the pages are of natural size. They are laminated in order to make them look like the actual collected found objects, which have lost relevance to their previous owners and were then sold to people like Maknytė who could grant them another life. And she does that by burning the slides literally with flame, but in a controlled way, in order to create patterns, holes, starbursts on the images. She also organizes burning actions where others can participate and see their creations projected on the wall immediately. A kind of competition takes place over who will create a more impressive picture with fire. The original image, although pushed to the background, remains important. There has to be a relationship, however strange, between the past moment of reality recorded by an anonymous photographer and the drawing with fire happening now. Magnete, the master, gets it right. Her images are the best. She succeeds in making her fire interventions reflect on the objects and landscapes photographed long ago. As Natalia Arlauskaitė has observed, in her slides we see two visual regimes competing with each other. The realistic one and the one that raptures it with abstract shapes. The burning also displaces forgotten memories further into the past, marks them as bygone period, exactly like the technology of slide projections is now obsolete when we can view photographs on computer screens anytime. The standard way to present those creations in a book would be to enlarge the images and let the reader explore the visual intricacies of interaction between reality and abstraction. That would preserve the traditional conception of the photograph as a frame around a moment of reality, which would strike us with beauty or strangeness. Indeed, there is such an image in the book, on the inside of its first cover, an enlarged photograph kept on the page with corners used in photo albums. It is of a city somewhere in Asia. We see the hieroglyphs on the buildings. A worm-shaped blast of light is tearing through its stillness. It comes not exactly from the sky, but from a reality beyond, and parallel the photographed one, like a message, a sign sent by unknown forces. This apocalyptic site is covered with a semi-transparent sheet of paper, including a short text by the artist. She writes about abstract glimmers of parallel worlds and suggests opening up paradoxical depth in their surface seemingly out of nothing. We can lift the sheet and check for the truth of words with a photograph, itself a standard proof of truth. This first image, however, emphasizes the material quality of slides in the subsequent pages. The tiny laminated squares mimic the slick appearance of the film that reflects light and thus hides the miniature image until we put it into the projector. The slide's image is usually a secret until it is revealed like a miracle of light. The slides in the book are readily visible. Thus they are both objects, slides, and projections, albeit tiny, not cinema-like. Thus they do not plunge us into the alternative reality created by light. Instead, we study the third layer, not mentioned in the text, but made explicit by such a presentation, the frames of the slides, which also contain lots of signs. Red dots, dates, numbers, printed inscriptions indicate that the image is made by some educational agency rather than a family photographer. There are some inscriptions by hand telling the opposite. Some frames are just dirty, some bear photographic company names and even statements showing that they were used as aids to teach people something about photography. There are some instructions how the slides should be put into the projector, names of countries where they were produced or where the photographed objects are situated. Many of those inscriptions and signs are upside down with regard of the images, which is also a mark of their half-baked quality. In order to be appreciated fully, they have to be put into the projector upside down, switching left to right, because the projection reverses the image. These traces of the old photographic culture, highlighted by the design of the book, are no less interesting than the transformed images of the past themselves. The shape of a scrapbook adds another perception that these are just materials for something more, just curious discoveries out of which one could create something or not. The beauty of scrapbooks is their diary-like quality, the way they reveal the raw process of thinking as a prompt for something that will or will not develop in the future. And the reader of this book is put into this position of creative beginnings, which is an unexpected gift and a rare event with books that tend to be finished products. The third book Photo Objects by Arūnas Kulikauskas has to be taken out of its box. The first impression is of an object, not of a book, because its covers are like a wooden lid on a chest for the reader to open and see what is inside. But there is a photograph on the lid, just a thin layer of photosensitive film that accepts the relief and the texture of the surface, as if sinks into it, becomes one with it, like an impression or an evasive memory left on the object, touched by someone's mind. So the book itself is a photo object. We know immediately what the strange entity is as soon as we see and touch the book. The cover photograph is different on each of the 99 printed copies. Mine is of a busy square, perhaps in New York, with letters Forever 21, forever repeated twice, crowds of people in front of the entrance to the shop, and above it there is an advertisement featuring a girl photographed above a square with tiny people underneath her. The image is fractured into many rectangles, multiple references to the photographic frame, thus it is in a way made of many photographs, like a montage, only it is a found montage. This, as well as a reference to young age and its energy, is why I have chosen this particular copy of the book photo object. It is mine, and nobody else can have it. It is as if a personal box book for keeping my own memories and carrying them around the world like in a suitcase. The inside of this box is upholstered with special color printed in silk screen by the artist Kęstutis Grigaliūnas. It is deep and opaque with a touch of mystery. When I turn the page, I find the various photo objects of Kulikauskas. His memories left as a thin layer of photosensitive film on various things, which are now presented as reproductions. The first object is one glass of a broken pair of spectacles with a photograph of an eye that has once looked through them, only upside down, like in a broken mirror reality. This seems to suggest that my gaze will also be imprinted on the photo objects I shall see in this book. Stones, Pandora boxes, cans, pieces of wood, cameras of Jonas Mekas. But another design solution prevents the reader from just examining the images. The edges of the pages are frayed, as if the sheets have been torn from somewhere to put into this collection, into this box bound as a book. That larger somewhere must be the photographer's life, richer with experiences, and more extended in time than these preserved fragments. Some pages have to be unfolded to reveal prolonged objects, pieces of wood covered with photographic memories. The opened pages create horizontal spreads throughout the book, as if it is just to fit in the horizontal objects, including the horizon once observed at the seaside. But also the process of unfolding and folding back activates the sensation of searching in a box full of secret openings, in which things are hidden from everyone's sight, kept just for one's private viewing. Thus, the artist, with help of the designer, lets us into his private world not only by showing recorded memories, but also by engaging us in the action of looking for secrets, finding them, and exploring them in private. This creates an intimate and magic experience, for I know that my copy is unique, with that image of Forever 21. Much like Forever 21, this book stops time. The memory object it contains cuts me out of the flow of presence, forms a capsule in time where I can safely explore the past. Therefore, my reading experience is not so much that of being carried away to the elsewhere, although Kulikauskas has created photo objects commemorating his travels to various countries and letters to distant people, but to another time whose reality is disintegrating like the material surfaces holding it are rubbing away, because visual perceptions of wearing off are supplemented with the tactile perceptions of the rough woody cover and the frayed edges of the paper. Thus, the identity of the book as a photo object and the reproduced photo objects inside it enhances the reader's perception of the reality of things that have been only photographed and makes another person's memories palpable, almost lived experiences. To conclude, the discussion of just 3 photo books designed by Gytis Kudzinskas shows the variety of approaches that have been carefully selected to convey the ideas behind different artists' work. But not only that, the books have been created as a medium that adds a thick layer of perceptual reality to the reader's experience of visual content, and thus enhances the perception that this is something intimate and uniquely personal, as if the reader had a real work of art rather than its presentation in the book. Additionally, since the design is both conspicuous and organically merging with the idea of photographs, this knowledge of being manipulated by the designer escapes the reader's attention. What she is left with is an object that falls out of the routine of both objects and books, and thus it becomes memorable in the 21st century world, overflowing with myriads of experiences that tend to numb our attention. Thank you.
Regarding the question.
Hello to everybody who are joining our live discussion. And again, thanks a lot for all presenters, for all speakers, for really inspiring presentations. And we have a lot of questions. And I would like to start from Katarzyna, the first, our presenter. And she has 2 or 3 questions. The first was about the content typography. And the question was from Viola. Do you think the artist's book demands an own vocabulary? So Katarzyna, now you can answer this question, please.
Right. Thank you very much for this question. Actually, content typography was a typing mistake. But indeed, I think that it is necessary to invent, discover, or develop new concepts to investigate artists' books and multimodal literature. And coining new terms is necessary because they describe a new way of thinking and conceptualizing this type of literature and art.
Yes, actually, it's the thing which I was thinking, that the process is always inspiring and you never know what will come out. And actually, there was the question also, is it ephemeral? Will it continue to exist? What do you think?
Well,
you can answer both, actually. Emiliano can join or, this question too.
Please, Kasia.
Yes, well, to speak about a phenomenon that has existed and been in use, in critical use for 20 years, to call it ephemeral, well, you judge it for yourself. I hope it will survive. I hope it is a useful term, but it's actually not for me to judge, but for other scholars, researchers who would use it or wouldn't use it. So, Emiliano, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Actually, I think perhaps it's not the right question. I mean, we can, of course, agree whether we need this word or not, but liberature existed and does exist and will exist. It's something which has ever existed. Then Pfeiffer has only invented the term for it.
Yeah.
We can, of course, discuss whether we need this term or not, or whether we call it this way. We can find another way, or that we can conceptualize in another way. But I think we will more and more be doing such things, especially now in this time of new media and new technologies, because new technologies have shown that we actually need physical books. This is the paradox.
Yes, actually, I liked a lot your Emiliano comparisons of the hot medium and cool medium. Actually, nowadays we see that we really, all those mediums are really hot are becoming hot because of the usage, and the book still stays cool in that sense.
Yes.
And actually, I also I see that there is also, like for both of you, that question about the liberature. Should it be considered within the field of literature or rather the visual arts? What do you think? Of course, both.
Yes, I think the term has been invented precisely because there was no such term in the field of literature, of literary studies. The artist's book has been in circulation as a term since at least the beginning of the 20th century. But we, Pfeiffer and I, we wanted to distinguish artist books, or rather literary works, with this visual component, with this material, spatial, architectural component, like B.S. Johnson or like Tristram Shandy, and many other examples, and to signal that, well, there is a special tradition in literature, yes, in literary writing, that takes care and notices the materiality of the book. So I see it more on the literary side.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then maybe you have seen also that question comparing with the children books where text, visual material make an integral entity. So do you have any comments on this question?
Absolutely. I think quite a lot of children's books fall into this category. And one of the classic examples to me is The Little Prince, yes,
Yeah.
by Saint-Exupéry, but also the Mumin series by Tove Jansson. And I suppose you could provide me with more examples.
Yeah.
So definitely, yes.
The Swedish one, for example, I'm reading with the Petson and Findus. I don't know if you know or not. It's again the entity.
Right. Yes.
The one which stops to my mind just. There was also that maybe similarities between Liberatura and Poesis Artificiosa.
Yes.
Yeah.
This I thought that could be an answer, a question to me, perhaps more. Yes, it's this life of literature before literature I was speaking about, because this relationship to the materiality and also to the visuality of the text is ancient, like the writing. So it isn't anything new, and it has ever existed in Western tradition as well as in Eastern tradition. We have different times, different periods in the history of Western literature where writers paid more attention to this aspect than in other times. And sure, the Baroque era is one of them. All this traditional, the emblems of the emblematics of iconography, it is something we could read through the lens of literature. Of course, it is an anachronism. I don't pretend to call it literature, but it is something which comes from the same need to have a multifaceted experience, not only limited to the words, but also to the visual aspect and possibility to the materiality. But before all, in this case, to the visual aspect. Perhaps Kasia want to add something.
Just one sentence. And this is connected with a question about art and language movement. I think the Baroque era and, the art and language movement or this kind of approach to the creative writing can be understood via the concept, yes, conceptual art. I think what underlies these movements and these moments in literary history and in art history is the focus and emphasis on the concept. So I see this as a kind of common dimension or common aspect.
Thanks a lot. Actually, those common aspects, this is the things which unites the whole conference. We are in the last session, the last discussion, but actually we are coming back to the early days, to other centuries, and it's the really nice thing that it's everything which unites, somehow combines these presentations, topics, and research is done. So actually, maybe let's switch to our second part, to the Gitis, Vilma, and Agnes topics, no routine, which is somehow connected, as Liberatura and no routine is a bit synonymous, could be called like this. And there were actually the questions attributed to Vilma. What is your role in no routine process, creative process? And actually there were questions actually related with your book you were showing during the presentation. It was Guten Tag, Oma. So can you join the discussion?
Yes, I can. Well, my role in No Routine Books, I'm co-founder of it. Together with Gitis, we started this platform or initiative for limited edition publications. And as Gitis' book designer from the start, I'm a photographer. So we usually, when we choose artists, we both discuss everything. When we finalize the process or post-printing processes, we try to do it both. I mean, I learn a lot from Gitis. I'm more like assistant sometimes in these in those technical productions. But as for discussing ideas, deciding where we are going to promote our books, and like what book fairs we're gonna visit, we do that together like a team. And I could say maybe I'm the more talkative one, and I talk more, and maybe it's easier for me sometimes. Gitis is the more quieter one, and he's doing lots of manual work with books.
And about that Guten Tag, Oma?
The Liebe Oma Guten Tag is the book which I presented in our talk. Is there anything concrete about it, what people would like to know, or just I should talk more like it's...
Why it is composed of the loose elements? There was the question.
Why it's composed from loose elements. Since the material was covering a long period of time, like before war, during the war, and after the war, at first my idea was to compile a book as a book, like with maybe different papers, different kind of elements, but as a book. But when we started to discuss with Gitis, he was like, how we're going to present those three timelines, and today and yesterday. It can be still under discussion, but we decided to put it into the box. These time maps, then the letters, then the present work of mine. The textbook, since they are separated with the long periods of times, and it's not needed to be joined physically, like attached to each other. So, and then I was mentioning the aspect of a person fleeing home very quick. And now we have clouds and iPhones and computers, and we can take one object and use it everywhere in the world. Where is the internet? But at that time, probably you would put your passport, some kind of photo, letter, I don't know what, into the box and run. So somehow we thought about that. And another thing, when this book is mine. my creation or our no routine books creation, but there is another part of the project where is the film and exhibition, and film was the first product of this project, and it was created together with my sister. And when we were collecting the material during the research, we were using the boxes to store the photos because we visited lots of people, so we collected different materials not to mix it. We used the boxes, so somehow the box was with us from the beginning of the project. So loose pieces, well, the story is a little bit loose in loose pieces, because like sometimes you make a research after 70 years, people are dead, you don't know anymore question. You are kind of in a position to raise the question or formulate the question, but you are not gonna have the answer from the person because he's not or she's not here anymore. So in the end, after the project, we somehow kind of grew, how to say it, we were like fine with not finding answers, but we somehow grew inside with our knowledge, or we understood something, so it's not needed to put everything in ordnung, in order.
Thanks a lot. As already only 10 minutes left for the discussion, I would like to join Agne, who was the last presenter, and she has a question from Viola. Agne, do you know the question, or you would?
No.
She says that in Germany recently came up the term photo book. Referring to a special type of artist book. Does there exist similar in Lithuanian language?
I wouldn't say that a special term exists. Maybe Gytis or Vilma could correct me. I think we call all books which present photographs something like Fotografijos knyga.
Yeah.
And
Albumas.
They are only different. What did you say, Vilma?
Albumas.
Albumas, yeah, it's an album. But actually what you do, they are not really albums, except the first book.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a special term, but I think a book which is treated like a special space to exhibit books has existed during the second half of the 20th century. I mean, many photographers did them. Just in Lithuania, it's quite a new phenomenon because, yes, I mean, in Soviet times, there was censorship. It was very difficult to make books, and it was a very rare phenomenon. And of course, we didn't have much contact with the world. And in independent Lithuania, the last 30 years, there are lots of photographic albums published, and they were what I have referred to as routine. And actually, we were getting fed up with this routine image of the photographic book. And only during the last decade, people started experimenting. Gytis and Vilma are not the only ones, but I think they are the first to use such a creative approach to photo book. And also they have made most of them, and they have created a phenomenon. Others just make one or two books and this is it. So yes, so that's why I talked about them.
Thank you.
Nice, thanks a lot. Actually, as we are coming more or less to the end, so there was a question, a lot of compliments to all the speakers and a lot of thanks. And there was a question about for Gytis and Vilma, do you have the special fans, the collectors who are waiting for the new book to come? And maybe there is the one who collects all the books. So can you make any comments on this?
When we started our initiative, it was very nice. Not like, yeah, could probably first letter when we got like, please send us your book. We would like to make a PayPal transfer or something like that. We were super glad. And there are a few collectors in the world who are usually order the new book. We just make it, we announce, and they order. Also, all the books are in a British library. Some of the books are in a MoMA, Goldsmith's Woman Book Library, something like that. Sorry, I don't remember the real correct names, but and like normal, like people who are collecting books, usually they, after the new release, they write us and they order the book to send to them. So yes, we have some fans, and we just posted a new open call on our Facebook page, and there's some activity going on. Like, so we hope we can continue.
Nice to hear. Maybe you would like to ask the questions to each other. Also, I can.
I was not really hearing the talks, sorry.
Yeah, all talks would be are recorded, so later on they would be at the web page of the Vilnius Academy of Arts, Arts Research Institute later, when there would be all agreements from the authors. And later on there would be also the book presenting all the papers. That would be perhaps in autumn. But now we are more or less... actually, all the questions, maybe something there is the comments that, of course, Liberature will exist and no routine will exist. Maybe something.
You have a ghost there.
Sorry?
It's the ghost of my younger son.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, everybody says that's the most live discussion and stream of all the conference. Usually everybody starts to be asleep, and now we are starting to be more and more alive.
Awake.
There was one maybe question to Katarzyna, that you repeated the phrase bits and pieces. What ways of reading do they suggest? Is it immersing a fragment or rather seeing a tangled whole? Have you seen this question?
Yes, I have, and thank you very much. It's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think that this kind of style, whether visual or literary, activates a very active reading on the part of the audience, because on the one hand, our attention flickers between focusing on the fragment and then trying to make sense of the whole, especially like in those collage novels or poems, or even in Kalachani's dynamic typography, where you see this variety or chaos of elements, and you really work very hard to make sense and to understand what is the relation between these fragments. So I think this stimulates very perhaps a more active reading, less kind of automatic, and because when we have fragments, we understand that they come from some kind of whole. Yes, like if there is a broken piece of a cup, for example, yes, broken, it falls down, and you're looking at the pieces and you're trying to put it together, to glue it together. So the same thing to me is happening when we are looking at this kind of text or work of art.
I think it's the very right attitude and the very right answer to conclude all the discussion. If anybody wants to add something, so you are still welcome. We have like 3 or 4 minutes. But if not, so actually I would like to say that, that it's the special, this is the last session, the 4th session of the conference. So these joins, I think were also fragmented. Maybe there are fans who listen to all conference, so we are very thankful. But the ones who just joined for 1 or 2 or 3 speeches or the whole session, we are again very lucky that you were listening to our conference. And again, thanks a lot for everybody, I mean for the presenters of this session, but also for all 19 authors who were, all of them were streamed, all of them were present, where we didn't had any breaks or any technical problems, so we are very lucky. And of course, we would be more happy if it would have happened alive in Vilnius. So we are saying again that we will welcome you on other conferences. There is a tradition that every year the Vilnius Academy of Arts Research Institute organizes a conference dedicated to one or another topic. So this year was for the book arts, and that was the first online conference ever. So actually saying goodbye to everybody, I also want to say that there would be the last words by our organizers, Yolita and Yeva, who will say hello to you, bye-bye and thank you. So now I guess we are saying thanks to all who were following our talks, to each other, and I think we will meet in other conferences. Hopefully they would be live. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, dears, it is the moment to announce that the annual conference of the Art Research Institute of Vilnius Academy of Arts is over. We are very pleased that it took place at the usual time, despite the quarantine that stopped all possibilities of traveling. We are very thankful for the director of our institute, Dr. Dalia Klajumienė, who initiated the realization of it using the online way. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to thank very much all speakers who have taken this challenge and agreed to participate. Congratulations to the partner of the conference, the Library of Vilnius University, on the 450th anniversary. We are very thankful for our financial supporter, Lithuanian Council of Culture, technical supporter, Conferenta, our colleagues, moderators, and all listeners who joined the online broadcast. The record of the presentations will be available on the website VDA.lt as soon as we obtain the consent of the speakers. Keep safe, don't lose your creative initiatives, and see you next time.
Norėčiau ir aš pasidžiaugti tikrai, kad Vilniaus dailės akademijos dailėtyros instituto konferencija įvyko įprastų laikų pavasarį. Ir aišku, už tą iniciatyvą mes turime dėkoti savo direktoriai Daliai Klajumienei, kuri tikrai matė viziją, kad mes ją galime įgyvendinti tokiu mums tikrai neįprastu būdu. Tai yra nuotoliniu būdu. Aišku, mes džiaugiamės labai savo partneriais, tai yra Vilniaus universiteto biblioteka. Mes norim tikrai dar kartą juos pasveikinti su tokiu garbingu jubiliejumi. Ir tikrai labai džiaugiamės jų paruošta paroda, kurią galėjote visą laiką stebėti ir žiūrėti. Taip pat norim padėkoti Lietuvos kultūros tarybai, tai yra mūsų pagrindinis rėmėjas, kuris leido mums organizuoti šitą konferenciją, o ją įgyvendinti padėjo konferentos technikai ir technikos išmanytojai, tai tikrai ir konferencija, kaip matėme, vyko sklandžiai, be jokių trūkdžių, dėl to irgi labai džiaugiamės. Taip pat norėjome padėkoti mūsų vertėjoms, kurios mūsų lietuviškus tekstus puikiai išvertė į anglų kalbą. Aišku, noriu padėkoti ir visų organizatorių, tai yra Ievos ir mano vardu, moderatoriams, kurie vedė, ir aišku visiems klausytojams, kurie klausėsi mūsų, buvo šitas 2 dienas. Ką mes galim palinkėti? Palinkėti tik geros sveikatos, išlikti kūrybiškiems ir iki kitų pasimatymų mūsų konferencijose. Ačiū Jums visiems.